This is what we'll cover today. We'll look at what mindfulness meditation is and its benefits. Cory will lead us through a few powerful experiences looking at mindfulness practices that really enhance well-being and reduce burnout, things that you can take away starting tomorrow. And finally, we'll end with next steps. And what can you do to cultivate greater mindfulness in your work and in your life moving forward? And we'll all end with commitments towards action. So that's what we'll do today. I will stop my share and I will pass it to Cory, who I'm so grateful has joined us today. Met him through a mutual friend and just an amazing human being, incredibly talented person, former monk, best-selling author, and just has so many great things to talk about when it comes to mindfulness and presence. So thanks for being here, Cory, and excited for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It's great to be here. And it's nice to be with all 49 of you. Well, 47 minus Sam and me. Yeah, we have about an hour here for me to share some of this work, and then we'll go into some questions after that. A couple things going into this. First, you might have saw in the housekeeping. This is a digital interface that we have here, which is different than being in person. And if you're like me, it can be very easy to get caught in the distractions around you, regardless of how good your mindfulness is. So notifications might arise, other tabs might come up, and email stuff. So from the very beginning, we can make a part of this practice the intention that we set for the time we're going to spend here together. And, I'm sure you've been in so many presentations over the last few months, and presenters say some version of this. But as much as you can put that aside, it will really aid in what we're trying to deepen here. And every time that you notice that impulse to check your phone, or when I start getting a little boring and you want to go on Instagram instead, notice that. That is the ground, it's the platform for doing this work of being in the present moment. I'm going to do my best to try and keep this engaging and fun. That's part of my job as a speaker. But also part of the work that we're exploring is being with the changing landscape of our life. And sometimes that's engaging and interesting. Other times it's boring and uncomfortable. So notice what your response is in those moments where maybe you're not as engaged intrinsically, and watch where your attention goes. And instead of immediately defaulting to that, what would it be like to continue to be with the experience as it is? And along those lines, I want to acknowledge that people are coming into this with lots of different experiences. We've all been navigating the current landscape of our world in different ways. And however you're coming to this moment is, it's not only welcome, but it again becomes a platform for doing the work that we're exploring here together. This is not about being positive. This is not about having just a positive experience. This is about making space for the many dimensions of what it means to be human. And so just see if you can, even in that invitation, relax into whatever it is you're feeling right now, whether that's, curiosity and interest, or a sense of discomfort, or skepticism, or fatigue. There might just be a general sense of exhaustion. And it's the presence that we're developing can happen through those experiences instead of our usual approach, which is try to be present in spite of them. So that's our broader invitation. Since I'm a new face, I'm sure to many of you, I'd like to share a bit about my story, just so you have some reference of who I am and what I'm coming into this with. So I wear a handful of different hats. Right now I'm in New York. I started the Long Island Center for Mindfulness many years ago. I've taught mindfulness-based leadership at Columbia University and teach positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. And these days I'm working with the new platform, mindfulness.com, which has been really fun to sort of shape the direction of the mindfulness industry. And so one thing you could put on my business card is mindfulness meditation teacher. And I think when a lot of people hear the term meditation teacher, they have a lot of different ideas of what that means. And for me, I remember thinking of meditation teachers as it meaning that you're a bit of a hippie, very spiritual, you burn incense, you light candles. And nothing against any of that, if that's what you're into. It just wasn't my jam when I was starting out with this work. I got into all of this for less noble reasons. I was trying to impress a girl. I had a hippie girlfriend in college. She was into meditation. I wanted her to think I was cool, so I started meditating. And there's no happy ending to that story, at least, because she broke up with me a couple weeks after that. But the different happy ending was that the pain of that breakup actually caused me to take the practice more seriously. And it went from this superficial undertaking to something I was intrinsically motivated to explore, primarily because I noticed a lot of uh, benefits happening pretty early on. At that point, I had very restless sleep. Ever since adolescence, I just started waking up like many times throughout the night. It was tough for me to fall asleep, stay asleep. I had a restless mind. I'd probably wake up about 30 times a night. Started doing a meditation practice, which I did not know what I was doing. I put my hands on my belly and I would just think, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And it was just very basic, just focusing on the breath. But after a couple of weeks of doing that, 15 minutes a day, 3 times a week, I went from waking up 30 times a night to only a couple times a night. And then started having nights where I wasn't waking up at all, which if you struggle with insomnia, you could probably imagine like how much of a benefit and life improvement that would be. So that caught my interest. I was in college at the time and I was going to class, but I wasn't actually in class. And I'm sure you don't have to be a student to resonate with this. Like your body is in one place, but the mind is someplace else entirely. So I wanted to focus, I wanted to be present, but it felt like there was an inability to do so. And, I had the classic diagnosis of ADD. And I'd say within about 3 weeks of doing the meditation, I developed this new thing that some people call paying attention. And like for the first time, I was really able to sustain focus and notice when my mind was wandering off and not just have to get caught up in that, but really bring it back. And so my grades improved, my listening improved. And it led to the third thing, which was just that I felt more grounded. I remember walking around campus and seemingly out of nowhere, there was just a sense of ease and peace that, nothing in my external world had changed. And yet something was shifting internally. So all of this piqued my interest, and me being a bit of a type A personality, I dropped my managerial economics major, got really into psychology and mindfulness and meditation, and a year and a half later, I was in a monastery with a shaved head. And so after college, I went over to Southeast Asia and Burma, and I lived as a monk for about 6 months. It was a six and a half month silent meditation retreat where every day we were meditating a minimum of 14 hours per day. And there was no reading, no writing, no listening to music, no contact with the outside world. As I'm saying it, it kind of sounds similar to what some people's experience of COVID has been recently, and maybe not to the same extent, but a certain isolation. And yet, it was the most transformative experience of my life, and I had never been happier and more content and more peaceful in my life. My interest in that retreat was not about Buddhism or becoming a monk. I was interested in the mind, and what I found for myself, and I'm curious if this resonates for you, is that a lot of how I was pursuing my well-being prior to that was in arranging all of the puzzle pieces of my life so that the picture looked how I wanted it to look. The puzzle piece of the relationships, family life, friendship. At that point, it was grades, job prospects. And then when all of that would come together, then I could be happy. Then I could rest. Um, and the issue with that is rarely does that actually happen where all of those puzzle pieces come together the way we want them to. And the real kicker is that sometimes they do come together and then we're happy. And then it's like a couple days later, it's off to the next thing. And now it needs to be bigger and better and greater. And this is not to suggest that we shouldn't have goals and visions, but there's this balance between moving toward the life we're creating and missing our life along the way as we're just constantly striving and getting caught up in this subtle aggression of self-improvement. And I was curious, what is the potential for us to cultivate a quality of peace that is less contingent upon external variables. And that's what I want to talk about here. This practice of mindfulness meditation is an internal technology that we can utilize to really research our own moment-to-moment experience, how the mind works, and how to train it to work more effectively in reducing suffering and improving our well-being. And so we'll explore what mindfulness is, why it might be worth cultivating, what some of the research is supporting it, specifically how the brain changes, um, basic techniques that you can utilize to integrate this into your life, like how to practice meditation, and then some really short things that you could do under a minute, so that you could bring this into your life, even if you don't sustain a meditation practice afterwards. So I'm excited to get into it with you. The first thing that we'll do is a short exercise, and it involves these bells. Now, sometimes I bring these bells and people go, all right, this is where it gets a little mystical for me. I don't know if I signed up for this. I know they can look that way, but the main reason I bring them is because they make a very pleasant ringing sound. And so, what we're going to do is make an exercise out of this. I could probably just ring these for the next hour straight and you'd have a great experience. That'd be kind of weird. And Sam would be shaking his head. So, instead, we're going to make an exercise out of it. I'm going to ring the bells. And all I want you to do is listen to the sound of the bell from the moment it begins all the way until that split second when it dissolves into silence. And just see if you can bring your full presence and focus to the sound in that way. Okay, good job. So very simple. We're gonna add a little something to this. I'm gonna ring the bells 3 times now, but for this one, the invitation is going to be to close the eyes. And if you've never done something like this, if it's uncomfortable to close the eyes, it's okay to keep them open. But we're just gonna see what it's like to settle in with the sound of the bell and to focus as if in this moment this is the most important thing in your life. And on one level, you could go, it's not the most important thing in my life. And on another level, you could go, this is the experience that's in front of you. This is the thing that is happening right now. And so honoring that it is a moment of your life, what would it be like to treat it as the most important thing that's here? And so we're gonna try and pay attention in that way. And again, the invitation to just follow the sound until each one dissolves into silence. And we'll do it 3 times. So if it's comfortable to do so, you can close your eyes. And we'll start with the first. Okay. So if your eyes are closed, you can invite them to open again. Great job. So uh, just take a moment to notice any subtle shifts that you experienced in doing that short exercise. It's okay if there was nothing radical that happened. You don't need to be enlightened after that experience, but you may notice a qualitative difference in the before and after of tuning into the bell in that way. There might be a quality of being a little bit more settled in the mind. You might be slightly more attuned to your body right now. You may notice more sounds around you that you weren't aware of before. And so this simple exercise of tuning into the bells can actually illuminate quite a bit about our moment to moment relationship to our present moment experience. Because on one hand, you could say, okay, big whoop, I didn't come here to get good at listening to bells. And that's not really my agenda here. I'm more interested in the quality of awareness that we brought to the experience of tuning into the bell. And what would it be like to bring that quality of awareness and attunement to more moments of our life? I think when we look around us, it's very easy to see how many of us are living our lives on automatic pilot, going from one thing to the next, caught up in the next shiny bell, which is often a notification on Twitter or Instagram or an email. And there's really it's the most human thing to be caught up in our particular culture right now that is creating very addictive technology, for better or worse. Um, and yet at the same time, we still have this capacity to reground ourselves in any given moment and become aware of where is my attention and how am I relating to this moment of my life. And so this practice of tuning into the bells in this way is this invitation to really reconnect. And you might feel the effects of that after just a minute or two. One invitation I'd like to make following that is, if you do feel slightly more attuned to your body and slightly more grounded, what would it be like to continue to hold that awareness as we go through this presentation? A lot of feedback that I'm getting from people these days through the virtual interface is just this feeling of disconnection and longing for that human connection. And it's true, this can't replace in-person experience, but you do still have the opportunity to ground and connect to yourself right here. And that it can be surprisingly nourishing. In when we're engaging virtually, not only can we feel disconnected from others, but we can actually start to disconnect from ourselves because we're so sucked into what it is we're experiencing and the screen itself. But notice if you can attune to seeing me right now and listening to my words, hearing what you're hearing, seeing what you're seeing, but also feeling what you're feeling. You can let the breath settle, lower your center of gravity, and practice this quality of groundedness and presence even as we continue forward. One of the reasons I really like the bells is it starts to illuminate a foundational principle of mindfulness, which is just this capacity to be aware of what is going on moment by moment. And that helps us move from a place of compulsion to choice, from reactivity and moving through our life on automatic pilot to actually being intentional with how we show up in each moment. And there's this famous quote. It says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And then in our response lies our growth, our freedom, and our happiness. If I could encapsulate in one sentence what it is we're exploring here through this work, it's how to start to see that space between stimulus and response, and then inhabit that space. Because it's only in that space that you can lead your life with any sort of intentionality, awareness, or in alignment with the person you want to be. The opposite of that is living on automatic pilot and going through the same reactions and patterns of conditioning that we always have in our lives. And it's one thing to know that we have a choice in each moment cognitively, and it's another thing to practice attuning to the moment as it is and seeing the subtle ways that we're dancing with the landscape of our life, and to be able to have the self-regulatory capacity and the nervous system regulation to be able to ground ourselves, be still enough to assess what's going on, and then say, how do I want to respond? And that might be something as simple as somebody saying something to me. It's activating some anger in my body, and it's causing me to want to say something that I'm pretty sure I'll regret later on. But it could also be noticing, I've been on Zoom calls for 5 hours and my shoulders are up to here because my hands are hunched on my desk. I haven't eaten in 5 hours. I haven't peed in 7 hours. And like that just moment of reconnecting, it's like, oh yeah, no wonder I'm edgy. It's because like I'm exhausted, I'm not sleeping, and I'm not taking care of myself. And so these small moments of opening to reconnecting with ourselves actually goes a really long way for the purpose of self-care, but also redirecting our attention back to what is most important to me right now, and how I want to live my life and how I want to be in this moment. And it all starts between that stimulus, between stimulus and response. So a big part of what we're going to explore here is how to get in there, and that is the best way I know how is through this practice of mindfulness. Um, if mindfulness is a new concept to you, I just want to emphasize that this is not something like I invented and went to a monastery and came back and like, oh, I created meditation and discovered it. No, this has been around for millennia. And also, it's really creeping up through the floorboards of education, of business, and healthcare, especially over the last 10 to 35 years. We're seeing this really deep interest in the practice of mindfulness. And part of that is due to the research that is arising around this practice and the benefits of it, which I'll talk about in a bit. But I think another big piece of this interest has to do with this thing. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, but this is called an iPhone. You might have some version of it. Amazing piece of technology. I love it. I used it to get somewhere I needed to go today. I use the app Waze. Waze, takes you through people's backyards and gets you to places 30 seconds faster. I think that's amazing, and so many other wonderful apps on this. And there was also some research that came out of MIT recently by Sherry Turkle that shows if you go on a date with someone, and this is on the table, even if it's turned off upside down and doesn't go off once, the mere presence of it prevents the conversation from going to deeper, more substantial levels. So that's interesting. We don't totally know the variables why, but I don't think you need to look too much further than your own experience. If Sam and I were having a conversation and he's talking, but I'm like, I just do this, like a quick glance, he'll be able to tell, like my attention isn't fully here. And we can sense that as human beings. So there's this disconnection that can happen with this, but this can also be a very easy way to disconnect from ourselves. Why is that? This has made it incredibly easy to distract yourself from the slightest bit of discomfort and stress that you experience. Back in the day, right, when Candy Crush was a big thing, how easy is it to go to the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, be sitting in line waiting for a half hour and just like, oh, I'm bored. Like we can't go more than 20 seconds of boredom without pulling this out and playing 3 hours of Candy Crush. Now, I think that's amazing, right? Candy Crush is exciting. I don't know what games people play these days, but going on Instagram, social media, all of that is designed to be fun, addictive, exciting. And I think it's really cool that we have technology that can sort of shift this moment and make it feel more exciting. But the long-term implications of that, of every time we feel the slightest stress, the slightest discomfort, we distract ourselves with something else and try to improve it. It's not like the seeds of that stress or discomfort go away. They often get stored in our backpack of life. And over time, the backpack gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And then one day we wake up and it's like, I don't know what's going on, but I just feel heavy. Or I don't know what's going on, but like objectively things in my life look good. And yet I feel out of touch with myself, or I feel hollow, or I'm feeling stressed or anxious. This is the emotional buildup that can happen over time when we're not attuned to ourselves, when we're not feeling our experience, and when we're doing the skillful compartmentalizing or distracting of ourselves to ourselves that starts to happen. And so, as we continue to engage here, the invitation again is to check, like, what are some of those ways that you deflect from the moment when it becomes uncomfortable, boring, or just something that you're not as engaged in, and what's it like to stay with those moments of discomfort, especially in the context of like creativity with boredom. I remember when I was a kid, all the kids on the block would come out, and we'd play this. We invented this game called oh wait, no, this is how it started. We were sitting on the front lawn, like there's like 10 of us. Like, what do you want to do today? I don't know. What do you want to do today? I don't know. What do you want to do? And we just sat there for an hour, and then all of a sudden someone said, oh my gosh, we should play tennis baseball. And we were like, what's tennis baseball? It's baseball with a tennis ball and a tennis racket. And we were like, that's an amazing idea. And so we found someone's yard that we could jump in, and we created this game, and we loved that we invented this, and we did it for years. If we were in those moments and like, what do you want to do today? I don't know. And instead we got an iPad and distracted ourselves. We might not have gotten to that place of creativity and invention. And I don't want to totally put down technology, because I'm a big proponent of also blending with the new landscape of our life, and creativity can emerge in different ways. But this is more to show that there's a lot that can come out of staying present to moments of discomfort, staying present to moments of boredom, staying present to moments of confusion. Usually just on the other side of that is some sort of insight, learning, or creative growth. So that's going to continue to be the invitation throughout this presentation, and also something to continue to explore in your own life. And this will be our segue into our first, our only meditation for this time together. I'm going to guide you through a short practice. There's nothing you need to know beforehand. You just have to listen to the sound of my voice. I'm not going to be hypnotizing you. You'll have full control over your mind. There's nothing you need to worry about there. The invitation will be to close the eyes if that feels comfortable for you. But if you'd prefer to keep them open, that's fine as well. This won't be a long practice. We'll do a few minutes. I'll ring the bells to settle us in, and then I'll ring them again at the end. But again, I'll be guiding you through the whole process. The only thing you need to do is just find a comfortable posture if you haven't already found one. You don't have to sit in some contorted pretzel-like posture, just something that feels grounded and at ease for you. And at this point, if it's comfortable to close your eyes, you may. And we'll start again by tuning into the sound of the bell, and see if you can follow it with your full presence until it dissolves. So we're just going to take the first few moments of this to settle in. Maybe taking a deep breath in through the nose and slowly out through the mouth. Inviting the jaw to soften. The teeth don't need to be clenched. Inviting the shoulders to be at ease, as well as the hands and the belly. And see if you can give yourself the permission to just be here. On the one hand, you already have, because you're here. But on the other hand, there may be a feeling of resistance to being here, or feeling like you should be doing something else. And so recognizing that you've already allocated this time for yourself. And because of that, there's no place else you need to be, nothing else you need to do, and no problems you need to solve in this moment. So see what it's like to relax into that understanding. You may even feel something in your body start to settle as you move from the momentum of your day into the stillness of this moment. As Parker Palmer said, self-care is never selfish. It's simply good stewardship of the only gift we have, the gift we were put on earth to offer others. Anytime we take care of ourselves, we do it not just for ourselves, but for the many others whose lives we aim to serve. So see if you can connect to the inherent goodness of this practice and its connection to all the other people in your life and your desire to help and to serve. So there are a lot of ways that we can practice bringing mindfulness to our experience. One way could simply be tuning into sound. And so there's, of course, the sound of my voice in this moment. But you may also notice some other sounds in your own space, or even the sound of your own breathing. And just see what it's like to attune your attention to anything that you can hear right now. Sound is not trying to distract you. It doesn't have an agenda. It's doing the only thing it knows how to do, which is to make sound. And so if you don't make a problem out of it, it won't make a problem for you, and instead can just become a gateway for tuning more deeply into this moment. You might even imagine any sound that you perceive as the song in the soundtrack of this moment. And this awareness of sound is something we can also do with thoughts moving through our mind. A lot of times when we think of meditation, we have this idea of clearing the mind of thoughts. But instead, we're going to explore just being aware of the thoughts moving through your mind. So just see what it's like to become an observer, as if you were watching clouds pass through the sky, just watching another thought. And it doesn't matter what the thoughts are. Could be, I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch tomorrow. I really want my kids to be meditating. Why is Cory talking so much? This is kind of weird. Whatever. Just notice how these thoughts seemingly arise out of nowhere. It's not like you asked yourself to think these thoughts. They just come up. So you can watch them as if you were eavesdropping on someone's conversation at the coffee shop. Just watch your mind talking to itself. And for the last portion of this meditation, let's just become aware of the fact that we're breathing, that you're breathing. And we could even say, becoming aware of your body breathing you. If it were up to you or your conscious mind to be breathing, well, anytime you get a text message or get distracted, you'd forget. And so watch how this process just happens. And what's it like to tune into this fundamental human experience and to maybe experience it as enough? No need for more bells and whistles to make it any better. It's just, what is it like to be alive right now? If it's helpful, you can place one hand on your belly just to feel the breath moving through your body more vividly. And as the mind gets caught in different thoughts or ideas, and we just smile at it, notice that the mind is thinking, and then gently bring the attention back to the breath. And see if you can do that with really precise awareness for 3 full breaths. In a moment, I will ring the bells again. I'll ring them 3 times. When I do, just bring the same awareness to the sound of the bell until the 3rd one dissolves into silence. And as you're ready, you can start to reorient yourself, eventually letting the eyes open again. Thank you for your practice, everyone. If you'd like to share your experience or anything that came up for you in that, feel free to type that in the chat bar. We did, I think we did about 10 minutes, a little bit more than 10 minutes, which is a nice chunk of time to meditate, especially if this was your first time, a new experience for you. I just want to acknowledge that a lot of different experiences can arise in this space. Sometimes we feel more grounded, more at peace, and we see. I was so relaxed, I almost fell asleep when felt like a very fast 10 minutes and very relaxing. Relaxing. I see that theme again. So yeah, this sense of being relaxed can absolutely come. It's like the snow settling in the snow globe. and we have this opportunity to reset, relax some of the tension in the body. Um, and then also sometimes there's a lot that we've been holding in the background of our awareness that can come to the surface, and it can be uncomfortable. So if you notice that, I just want to make space for that experience as well. Meditation isn't about feeling good. It's about feeling what you're feeling with good awareness. And the plot twist of that is that eventually that makes you feel good. But sometimes being present to that discomfort can be uncomfortable. And it's part of this reconnecting and cultivating a depth of presence in our life that can hold the full complexity of life. And I don't actually believe that our world just needs more positivity. I believe our world needs minds that are more complex, that can hold nuance and polarity, and can stay open and grounded to the full range of the human experience. And that's what we're practicing here. That's what you got to practice here. With each breath, we might feel the subtle inhale, the subtle exhale, but we also might feel the mind wanting to go in this direction and that direction, and feel more comfortable or feel more certain or do something. And just what's it like to hold all of that without immediately reacting? I don't know if you realize how much of a superpower that is in our life these days, in our culture these days, which is just completely consumed in conditioning, reactivity, automaticity. To have this training, to hold all of that, to see it all, to watch it, and to not immediately react is a power, because then you get to be more intentional. That's that space between stimulus and response, and how you show up, how you respond is up to you. But we have no opportunity to do that if we're so consumed with the momentum of our life. So we haven't even defined what mindfulness is, and that's intentional because I want you to get more of an experiential sense of it before we start putting words on it. But one definition we have is by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, and he says mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally. Paying attention on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally. So let's just break that down. First three pieces of it are pretty straightforward. Paying attention, got it. On purpose, sure. In the present moment, yep. Non-judgmentally. That's the piece where we tend to, we're like, oh, going smooth, and boop, fall off the cliff. Because we tend to be very good at judging. We're wired to judge. It's our evolutionary foundation to be assessing moments like good, bad, safe, unsafe, pretty, ugly, right, wrong. This is just what the mind does. And so it's totally normal, and those judgments can be useful. And non-judgment in mindfulness isn't saying that you're not going to have judgments. It's just saying that you don't have to judge yourself when the judgments arise, and you don't have to judge yourself for whatever experience arises. Instead of trying to create a certain experience in your meditation, what's it like to watch the entire thing unfolding with this quality of curiosity and non-judgment? And what does the judging mind look like in meditation? Well, one example is, like, let's say you're a bit of a type A personality and you come to the meditation and you go, all right, cool. I signed up for this Zoom webinar. I'm going to be the most peaceful person on this call. What do I have to do? Focus on my breath. Got it. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And then what happens? The mind starts, thinking about something. I want a cookie right now. And then we start going, you're an idiot. Why are you thinking about cookies? Don't you know we're supposed to be meditating? I knew you'd suck at this. I bet everyone else is doing so much better at you. You're a terrible meditator. You have ADD, you have ADHD, you have OCD, right? And the mind just gets caught in this ruminative loop, assessing like how much you suck at this practice. And what it ends up doing is just creating more tension, more suffering. This practice that you were doing to try and soften some of that then becomes another opportunity to reinforce the very conditioning that you're trying to change. And so we just get to notice what is our relationship to our mind and to our experience moment by moment, and just step back as this impartial witness, this observer. Doing that for just like a couple minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, 1 minute a day, stopping, not being so consumed in the flow of our life, just watching it allows you to do it in those moments where you most need it, in the conversation with your partner or a colleague or on a Zoom call, and you feel yourself just caught in the momentum of everything. And then to take a moment where you actually become lucid and just watch what you're saying or watch how you're reacting and going like, where is that even coming from? And then we could breathe and reground and go, how do I actually want to show up in this moment? And so that non-judgment allows us to hold the fullness of our experience without beating ourselves up for what we're experiencing. Not only is it a lot easier to go through life in that way, um, but it's a powerful space to hold for ourselves and for other people. So it doesn't mean that judgment is bad, as I said. Like we need it, and if you walk in the middle of the street and there's a car coming, I want you to jump out of the street. I don't want you to say, "Oh, I just attended a mindfulness conference and Cory said, be non-judgmental. Let me see if I could be with this experience." No, you're going to get hit by a car and it's going to hurt. So this isn't about denying the certain realities of life. It's just about noticing how consumed we can get in judgment and how much it can actually create extra suffering for us. And there's a lot of research supporting like the benefits of when we start developing this quality of attention, of mindfulness. That research has been done for the last 35 plus years. And consistently we see if you engage in this practice, which can be as little as 5 minutes per day, you'll start noticing reductions in stress and anxiety, in depression, in relapse in depression. That's as good, if not better, than medication. Improvements in joy, in creativity, in productivity, focus, concentration, working memory. What I've been most fascinated in terms of the research is just how the brain changes in response to a meditation practice. So I brought a human brain with me today. Just kidding. There's a ball of Play-Doh, get from Toys R Us. Not anymore, unfortunately. Rest in peace, Toys R Us. But what we're seeing is that through new technology, MRIs, fMRIs, we can study the brains of meditators, both very experienced meditators and people that are new to this practice, never meditated before, and what happens when they engage in this practice for a few weeks. Well, what we are finding in as little as 8 minutes per day, areas of the brain responsible for stress, anxiety, rumination, these areas actually start to shrink. And then areas responsible for working memory, concentration, focus, empathy for other people, those areas actually start to grow. What I love about this research is it just suggests that the brain is like any other muscle in your body. And so if you wanted to develop your bicep, you'd go to the gym and you could do bicep curls, right? 3 sets of 10, come back the next week, 3 sets of 10, come back the next week, 3 sets of 10. Eventually, over time, the bicep gets stronger, more developed, more functional. Why? The bicep curl is the exercise for the bicep. One of the things we're seeing is that the mindfulness meditation practice is the exercise for the brain. And every time the mind wanders and you bring it back, you could think of that as like a bicep curl, right? The weight of the dumbbell pulls you down, you pull it back up, pulls you down, pull it back up, pulls it down, pull it. Well, you're focusing on the breath, the mind wanders, you bring it back. Mind wanders, bring it back. Mind wanders, bring it back. That motion is a lot like this motion. And so we're often frustrated by thoughts moving through the mind, but those thoughts and those distractions and the different emotions that arise, those become the opportunities to train the very things that you're interested in. They become the opportunity to train being patient. They become the opportunity to train focus. They become the opportunity to train presence and to train groundedness amid the chaos. So if we're going into the practice or you've tried it in the past and had these grandiose ideas that it's just going to be super pleasant and easy, well, I just want to debunk that myth for you right now, because you're taking the same mind and body that you're walking through your entire day with, and you're going right into a meditation practice. And sometimes that can be smooth and easy. And other times, if you do it long enough, you're going to see that the mind likes to think a lot. And the body can get uncomfortable, and there could be pain, and there could be difficult emotions, and unprocessed grief or stress or anxiety. And so learning to be with that, to be present to that, and not immediately have to numb, compartmentalize, suppress, allows us to feel the full human experience, to own it and integrate it into our presence, so that we don't have to constantly be running from ourselves or only showing up partially to our Zoom calls or to our conversations. And eventually, the more we do that, the more we can hold these many dimensions of our human experience without collapsing to them. And we train it in these little micro hits of meditation. if we connect, or let's just connect this to like negative thinking, one of the things we're also seeing is that there's something in the brain called the negativity bias. This is your brain's inclination to focus more on what could go wrong rather than what can go right. And some of you might be going, "Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with that." All of us have fell into that at some point in our lives. Like a hundred good things could be happening, but one bad thing happens, and what does the mind do? It latches onto that, ruminates about it, can't stop thinking about it. This is a negativity bias. Why does the brain do this? If we look at it from an evolutionary perspective, just imagine two of our ancestors are out in the jungle hunting for food about 150,000 years ago. They come across this big dark cave. One of them goes, "Oh my gosh, look at that cave. We should totally go in there. It's going to be a blast." And the other one's like, "Are you crazy? It's dark. We can't see anything. There's probably bears. Like, I'm terrified right now." And the other one's like, "Whatever. You're kind of a loser. I'm going in anyway." And so what happens? They go in, there's a bear, they get eaten, and then they die. Now, the other one that was super fearful, super anxious, what happened to them? They went back to camp, they survived, they procreated, and then they passed down their shitty, anxious genes to us. So now, all of these thousands of years later, through the laws of natural selection, we are literally wired to focus more on what could go wrong rather than what can go right. Why? The ancestors that had all the genes that we wanted, the ones that were super trusting and loving and walked around naked and pet all the big furry things, they died very quickly. The ones that survived were the ones that could stand in a corner and go, "That could go wrong, that could go wrong, that could go wrong, that could go wrong. I'm going to stay right here and talk to these couple people that I trust." So this is what we're left with, and we have to be grateful for it because we wouldn't be here if it weren't for that. But this is why you can have a lot of good things in your life, but your mind is still scanning for everything that can go wrong. And when it finds something, it grasps onto it and it exacerbates it, wants to create as much pain around it as possible so that you know not to go near it. Sometimes that is important, and a lot of times it's deeply unnecessary. So Rick Hanson wrote the book Hardwiring Happiness, Buddha's Brain. He says the brain is like Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. However, we can start to recondition the brain through a meditation practice. How does this happen? Other than just trusting the process, let's look at it very practically. Right, we're doing something like focusing on the breath. And for the record, there's lots of meditations, not just focusing on the breath. But for simplicity's sake, let's say we're focusing on the breath. Then the mind wanders. Well, what are we doing? Let's say the mind gets caught up in a negative thought of like, "What's wrong with me? Why did I say that thing to that person before? Like, I'm an idiot." We notice that tendency to ruminate on it. We feel the grip of that. We practice softening the grip and then returning our attention back to the breath. Mind wanders off again into something else, something negative. I'm terrible at this. We notice the thought. We don't fuel it. Then we practice coming back to the breath. And the more that we do that, the less those thoughts have control over us. They might still arise in the future, although that does tend to dissipate with the meditation practice as well. But they don't have as much influence and less of an emotional charge over time. And we develop a little bit more of a positivity bias, which is this capacity to hold and experience the richness of our life rather than just falling down the rabbit hole of negativity. And so, if you wanted to read more about that, you could check out the book Hardwiring Happiness. Some really cool science in there supporting it. So all to say, like, this practice is grounded in science. And if we look at it very practically of like, how is this helping with stress? Well, one of the definitions we have of stress is when our perceived demands are greater than our perceived resources to meet those demands. Perceived demands greater than perceived resources. So what's the key word? Perceived. And why is that the key word? Well, often what we perceive to be demanding is very different than what is actually demanding. So when you're in the shower in the morning, are you actually in the shower? Okay, lost you there, Cory. Yeah, I've no doubt that your body is in the shower, but is your mind in the shower with you? Probably not, or it might be, but you might be bringing other things in the shower. Your kids might be in the shower. Your kids might literally be in the shower, but your inbox might be in the shower. Your 401k might be in the shower. All your Zoom calls might be in the shower. Traffic might be in the shower. And so here you are standing in the shower, but you're not just in the shower. You're already making breakfast for the kids. You're already on these meetings. You're already having that difficult conversation. You're already in your inbox taking care of 100 emails. Who the heck has the resources to be able to meet all of those demands? None of us. It's just not possible. The brain can't do it all at once. But the interesting thing about the brain is that when you're caught in all of those thoughts, that's what it perceives as its reality. And so even though we're not doing all of those things, being consumed by the thoughts of those things creates this perception of these demands, and that creates this imbalance between perceived demands and perceived resources, because there's no amount of resources you can have to do all of that in any given moment. However, you drop your attention, at least in that moment, into what's going on. You're just standing in the shower. You're just rubbing soap on your body. You're just shampooing your hair. Most of us have the resources to be able to meet those demands. Now, you could create some pushbacks to this. One of which is just like, I like to think when I'm in the shower. Are you saying I can't plan when I'm in the shower? I do a lot of my planning, and that helps me not feel stressed later on. What are you telling me, Cory? You can absolutely plan and think when you're in the shower, but would you agree that there's a difference between being lost and sucked into your thoughts versus being grounded and present and aware that your mind is thinking? When you're sucked into the thoughts, that's when they're perceived as reality. But when you're grounded and just watching your thoughts, well, that's a very different relationship. And it's the one that we practice in meditation, where we're just watching thoughts move through the mind like clouds through the sky. When we do that, those thoughts have less of an emotional charge. It's a practice, but it's something that we can do where we're like, okay, I do have to consider the future, and I might need to prepare for certain things. So let me consider that, but also recognize that it's not happening right now. We can train ourselves to hold that. The other reality that people might say is like, well, I'm not always in the shower during the day. Like, actually, there are some stressful things going on in my life, and it's one thing after another, after another, after another. How does this cute little stress diagram help with that, like the reality of life? And that's a great point as well. So let's just take something relatively benign like email, and let's say you have 100 emails to take care of. And they all need your attention by 5 p.m. and it's 9 a.m. Like, when you first get into your inbox and you're doing that one email, are you just doing one email? Or is your mind already cursing out how much you hate email, thinking about the 99 other emails you have to take care of, how much you hate the person that invented email, how much better life was without email? And if so, what's going on is you're not just doing one email, you're literally holding the burden of 100 emails. But the reality in that moment is you're not doing 100 emails. You're just doing one. And it's not just one email, it's just writing one sentence. And not just one sentence, it's just one word. And that's not putting on rose-colored glasses. That's not sugarcoating the experience. It's dropping into the fundamental reality of what is here. And often when we drop into what is actually here, we see that it's a little less of a catastrophe than the mind is making it out to be. Not always. Sometimes the reality of our situation is accurately being portrayed in the mind, and there's space for that. And that's when we just surrender to the process and allow ourselves to feel what we're going through. But a lot of times we tend to compound our suffering. We get caught in secondary suffering. You know what I mean by that? The primary pain, which is already a difficult experience, but then the secondary pain of, why me? How long is this going to last? Why did God do this to me? Nobody else seems to struggle as much as I do. All of those thoughts trigger negative emotions, which compound the painful experience that you're already going through. And part of this, the beauty of this practice of mindfulness, is it just allows us to let some of that go and meet this moment of our life as it is right now, with a little bit more simplicity, a little bit more clarity, and a little bit more groundedness. It's really a science for how to show up. There's nothing you need to believe in here, and there's no positive thinking that's necessary. It's just asking you to tap into the innate resources you already have, which is this ability to be aware of what is happening moment by moment by moment. And with that awareness, seeing more clearly, like, what is actually going on. If you have something that's going to be difficult Wednesday evening and it's Monday morning, do you have to be suffering Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, Tuesday evening, Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday morning, Monday evening, Monday afternoon, Monday? We compound our suffering. And it's a beautiful thing as humans to be able to think about the future and imagine and create. And with that comes this ability to think about the future and everything that can go wrong. So once we have that awareness, we have a little bit more of an opportunity to do something about it. And that's what this meditation training is really about. So I want to give you a couple simple practices that you can do. And then I'll give you some ways that you could get some free follow-up resources if you want to go deeper into meditation. But these are some things that you can utilize to reground yourself throughout the day. The first is just something called the 4-7-8 breath, which is created by Dr. Andrew Weil. So we'll do it together. What it involves is breathing in for 4 seconds, holding the breath for 7 seconds, and then exhaling for 8 seconds. So let's try this out. Breathing in for 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. Holding for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good. That's a 4-7-8 breath. Now, you might notice that it's hard to do a long exhale. And that's because if we're trying to exhale as we normally do, like this, it's going to run out probably after 3 seconds. So there's a way that you can constrict the breathing a bit so that you can elongate it. Imagine that you're blowing hot air on a cold window like this. And then just close the mouth. You should notice that you can exhale for much longer. So we'll try it one more time, and this time you can exhale that way. So breathing in for 4 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. Holding for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great. That's a 4-7-8 breath. You can use this many times throughout the day. I use this before I go to sleep. I have this Aura ring, which tracks my my sleep metrics. When I do this for like a few minutes before bed, it lowers my heart rate and gets me into deeper sleep quicker, earlier in the night, which is really important for restoration. So you do it before bed, first thing when you wake up, or anytime that you're feeling stressed. The next is an exercise called Take 5, which we'll do together as well. So take out your left hand like this. Take out your right pointer finger, place it in the palm of your hand right around the wrist. And then what we're going to do is slide the pointer finger up the thumb, taking an inhale through the nose. So breathing in, exhale back down through the mouth. Slide up the pointer finger, inhale, back down, exhale. Up the middle finger, inhale, back down, exhale. Ring, back down, and pinky, back down. Cool. So let's take 5. Really simple. There's something about the tactile nature of that and syncing that with the breath that seems to be very settling to the parasympathetic nervous system. If you have kids, they really love this, so you could teach it to them as well. It is a kid's exercise, and then I said I should teach this to adults, and started doing that, and adults were really into it. And then I said, am I going to be bold enough to go into corporations and tell executives to pet their pinkies every time they're stressed out? Did that, had the CEO get back to me. He was like, Cory, all that meditation stuff, that's great. But that Take 5 thing, I love that. That's phenomenal. So there's something about it that's just really simple and anyone can do it. And there's usually an immediate reward. Is it going to change your life to pet your pinky and breathe? Probably not, but it might reduce your stress and reground you and make you a little bit more present by 5 to 7%. And I believe that burnout is happening in the margins, meaning you're not going to have just one difficult experience unless it's a traumatic experience and then feel like, I can't keep going. Usually what happens is we're stretching ourselves slightly beyond what we should be tolerating or what we think we can tolerate. But we do that day after day, week after week, month after month. And eventually the emotional rubber band just gets so stretched that it snaps. But if we have practices to manage that extra 5 to 7% of stress that we're feeling, to reground ourselves, even though it might feel small in the moment, the long-term implications of it are pretty significant. And that's what some of these little practices help us do, like Take 5, like the 4-7-8 breath, and like this next thing, which is shifting your what if to what is. This is more of a cognitive hack. So we're all familiar with the what if mind. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this doesn't go well? What if they don't like me? What if I fail? What if, what if, what if? Sometimes the what if mind can be useful. It can help us prepare, take action, be good activists. And a lot of times it can just lead to extra neurotic chatter that's not serving us in any positive way. And so when you find yourself caught up in the what if mind and it's not serving you, the invitation is to just drop back into what is here. Shift your what if to what is. And you could do it right now. Like for me, I feel my feet on the ground. There's a roof over my head. I feel my body breathing, feel relatively well fed. When I drop into what is here, just the fact that I'm talking, seeing you, um, I see again that this moment is less of a catastrophe than my mind could make it out to be. I could get caught up in all the different what ifs of my life, and that could easily whip me up into a frenzy. But if I drop into what is here, again, we reground ourselves, step out of the story of our minds, and usually see that we can actually be with what's happening in this moment. So that's just a simple cognitive hack you could use, shifting what if to what is. And then the last is a simple technique that you can utilize in communication with other people to bring mindfulness into conversation. And this is simply to listen to understand rather than listen to respond. So often in conversations, we're already anticipating what we're going to say. We're listening to someone's story. It triggers something that we want to say, and we start thinking about what we're going to say before the person's even finished saying the thing that we're trying to respond to. And one of the great gifts you can give to someone is just meeting them and listening to them with presence, with awareness, with compassion, and really with curiosity. There's this deep need to be understood and to feel heard as humans. And you might not always get that from other people, but you can offer it to other people. And the more we offer that gift, interestingly, the more it starts to come back to us. And so what I love about this technique is you don't need to have a deep meditation practice. Next conversation you have, just make the intention to listen to understand rather than respond. And notice how it transforms your quality of presence and curiosity in the conversation. We'll go into Q&A in a moment, but if you do want free follow-up resources like guided meditations and sleep meditations and book recommendations and app recommendations, I have a way for you to get those, and I'll put it in the chat bar. You just text your email address to this number. The number is 201-508-0100. If you're coming from out of the country, out of the US, you could just do +1 before that. But just text your email address to that number and you'll get an automated email to your inbox with all of those download links, including a 7-page mindfulness starter kit. And most of my meditations these days are on mindfulness.com, the mindfulness.com app. And you can get that. There's a daily video and a daily meditation that's offered to you. And that's a great way to get a practice going. Yeah, the number is in the chat bar. So if you look there, I just posted it again. All right. So we'll transition into some questions. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Cory. So many great practical techniques and just thoughts on how to live a life of mindfulness and presence. Have a few chats coming in already. Why don't we take Julia's to start? Julia asked, any tips on maintaining this as a ritual or habit? I've always struggled with routine. What's been your own insights around that, Cory?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stuff related to habit literature. One simple thing that's often talked about is attaching this to a pre-existing habit. That's one of the easiest ways to integrate new habits into your life. What is something that you do regularly, and then adding this before that or after that, so you already have a cue. And this could be like a morning routine, after a shower, before a shower. And just getting used to layering that in. And I would start with keeping it very simple, like 1 to 5 minutes of practice, so that it doesn't feel like a hugely consuming thing, and then build from there. But really, like when it comes, I had this recognition a number of years ago, when it comes to like crafting your life, it basically starts with like, okay, what feels important to me that I want to develop in my life, and then reverse engineering from there of like what are the steps I need to do to get there, and meditation might be included in that. And then the next thing is just how do I ensure that I will do that. And so for me, what I do, I actually have this right here, interestingly enough. This is a personal contract that I wrote out for myself. And it says things like, I, Cory Muscara, promise myself a commitment of 1 week to the task outlined below. I understand this contract is 100% binding. and can only be breached in circumstances outweighing the value of my word to myself. I've reviewed the circumstances that fall within this category and have undertaken the designated rituals that reinforce the sacrosanct nature of this commitment. And so whatever it is I want to do for that week, I write it down, I put on my monk robes, I bow to it, and then I sign it. And what that does is it just eliminates any dissonance. Like, so for one thing this week, I have, and when I say eliminates dissonance, I mean like this wavering, like, should I do this? Can I really fit it in? It's just not a question. It's just, I have to do it. It's my word to myself. It's the most sacred thing. And so one thing I have this week is just making sure I jump out of bed within 30 seconds of waking up, because I've gotten in this bad habit of like checking Instagram. I'm posting a lot more on social media these days, and just like, how did that post do yesterday? And I could end up being there. It's embarrassing to say, but sometimes like over an hour just in my bed, and it's such a time suck and an energy suck. And so and a lot of it starts out like the first minute in bed. I think, all right, I should probably get up, and then it goes a little bit longer, a little bit longer. Now that I signed this contract, 30 seconds, it's just, I can't think about it anymore. There's no wavering. I just get up. So if you're really interested in this practice and you want to commit to yourself to do it, you can. It just requires forming that commitment in your own mind, and it might be a personal contract that you sign, or something other that you perceive as sacred that you don't want to breach, or it might be accountability that you ask someone else to hold you to. But I found that when it really comes to integrating these routines, it's just a matter of like, what is going to force me to do it and reduce that dissonance between like doing it and thinking about doing it.
Love that. I love the notion of a contract, Cory.
Yeah,
I might take that up. Think about what
cool.
to write for this week. We have a question from Tom. It's a heavy hitter. I like this one.
I
Tom
love it.
asks, "How do you reconcile the peace and contentment achievable from mindfulness with drive and ambition, which society and many of us believe are important? How do you
Yeah.
reconcile those two?"
Um, yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things to say about this. So Tom, I don't actually hear in your question this like an internal wrestling yourself with this. It might be there, but this more seems like a philosophical, like, okay, you can attain peace and contentment through this practice, and how does that match up with what society often perceives as important? When I work with a lot of high achievers, this question usually comes from a place of like, I'm scared that I'm going to lose my edge. My response to that is like, yeah, you might lose your current edge and you might find a new one. Um, so let's just look at the relationship between contentment and drive. The research on gratitude, and I think gratitude we can almost look at as like synonymous with contentment, or pretty close. Like when we're feeling a moment of gratitude, like we're at ease with this moment, we appreciate this moment. The research on gratitude by Bob Emmons shows that people that keep a gratitude journal and increase their gratitude are actually more likely and more energized to fulfill their goals and pursue their goals. So there's actually this relationship between feeling a little bit more full and pursuing something. However, with that said, I've also seen the opposite of that in real life, where there's a lot of people that work extremely hard and are very productive, and then they start engaging in these practices, and they lose some of their steam around what they were doing before. But in those cases, it is primarily because their motivation was coming from a place of fear, anxiety, unworthiness, or self-hatred. And then my question to those people is like, you can absolutely continue on that cycle of doing what you're doing out of fear, anxiety, and self-hatred, but is that the life you want to live? And if things start to reorganize themselves, once you actually start to like yourself and appreciate your life, maybe that is telling that you need to be doing something different or going about it differently. There are some scenarios, a lot of times we once we lose some of that, and that first source of motivation, like the self-hatred, the fear, the anxiety, we can end up in this state of limbo for a little bit, but then our mind reorganizes around our life. And even monks, I mean, monks are hugely ambitious people. They wouldn't be committing their lives to this practice and giving up sex and all of like the great things you could also experience in the world if they weren't ambitious towards something. The goal is just different, which you could perceive as like not having any goals, but that's not quite it. Um, and so like that source of energy that drives us to have ambition, to care, to want to relieve suffering from other people, to want to live a good life is still there, even when we have that contentment. It's just coming from a place that's more full and the cup overflowing rather than the cup being empty and we're like, gimme, 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 so that I could feel good about myself. And that's just, that's a hollow cup. There'll never be enough filling up with achievements to fill that. Instead, it comes from the inside out, and now we just have something to give in it, and we want to offer it to the world. Yeah, great question, Tom.
Beautiful. Great. Time for one more, and it's a good one from Allison. In the Q&A, I'll put in the chat so you all can see it. But Allison asks, does negativity bias typically go away after adopting a long-term meditation practice? And how do you specifically overcome this issue? I struggle with this a lot. Despite meditating, I often worry and think the worst. I have some thoughts on this, but would love to hear what you think.
Oh, I'd love to hear what you think. Uh, eh, you go first, and then I'll add anything.
I'll be quick about this. I find, Allison, and I've studied acceptance commitment therapy, which is a really fascinating approach to mindfulness and therapeutics. But that it's not actually about getting rid of those thoughts or the negativity bias. It's your relationship to the negativity bias, right? And so it's how do you shift that relationship to, oh, there's that thought again. It's not actually a problem I'm having that thought. The challenge is my relationship to that thought.
Yes.
And that's difficult stuff. But meditation has helped me with that. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the negativity bias. So, with a lot of these deeply ingrained, like primal tendencies of ours, um, they they don't go away entirely, and we don't want them to go away entirely. We're really learning better how to dance with them as they do arise. The negativity bias does reduce over time, and so a common phrase in the neuroscience literature is neurons that fire together wire together. And so every time, let's say you pull into work, a certain neuron goes off that says, "Oh, I'm at work." And then you might have another neuron that goes off that says, "I hate work." As an example. And so every time you see work, you hate work. You see work, hate work. And so that's going to create a neural circuit in the brain, this like bridge that's connected. And you won't even have to think about it anymore. You just pull into work and there's already a feeling of hatred. But you can start to recondition that. You show into work, you feel that like, oh, I hate work. You take a breath and you could ask like, what's one thing I'm grateful for about work? And then the mind will quickly go, nothing, I hate work. And so that's where we take a breath and go, I know, but if there was one thing you could be grateful for, your mind goes, there's that person I see at the water cooler that doesn't totally suck. They're okay. And then like we start to feel a little seed of gratitude there. Well, that's going to fire off a different neuron in the brain. And the more that you do that, the easier it gets to fire off that neuron. And then we start to recondition, like pull into work, and actually there could be a feeling of gratitude that arises. That can take some time, and it depends on the pattern. Some of these patterns can be shifted quite easily, and some of these patterns can be quite deep. But it all starts with like this awareness of when the negativity bias arises and seeing that we can fuel it, or we could practice with just holding it and watching it and then redirecting the attention. But Allison, like if this does feel difficult, one thing I would suggest is letting your mind go through those thoughts, but practice more relaxing your body in relationship to those thoughts. There's this intimate connection between the mind and the body. And usually when those thoughts arise, you're going to feel some tension, especially around the negativity bias. It's not always possible to shift the thoughts in our mind, but we have much more access to relaxing and softening the body. And by doing that, we'll start to reduce some of the emotional charge around the negativity bias, around those negative thoughts as they arise. And so I would just make your practice in these early stages being aware of when the mind goes into those negative thoughts. First, just saying, "Oh, I see you," thoughts. You could give them a name. I call some of mine Cranky Cory in the morning. Cranky Cory just doesn't want to do stuff. And I go, "I see you, Cranky Cory. I know today's going to suck. You're not going to be good at this. I know, I know." And it's just like, let's do it anyway. And so you learn to work with it, give it a name, don't let it consume you subconsciously. Um, and then in a practice, you could just watch these thoughts move through your mind, but just keep the body totally relaxed as they're there, and see how that starts to help to recondition.
Thanks, Cory, and Ellison giving you some love in the chat. Looks like that was
Cool.
helpful. And
Great.
love, starting with the body and then extending that to the mind.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Cory. This has been incredibly enlightening and soothing. I feel more grounded. I
Cool.
imagine many folks who are on this call do as well. And so thank you for sharing lessons and strategies and best practices and making this such a tangible, thoughtful 90 minutes for all of us. Perhaps we'll
Mm.
have to have you back. And just to close, for everyone on the call, thank you all so much for joining today. As we do in every Hone class, would love to hear in the chat some of your commitments. What are you taking away from this workshop with Cory today? What is a commitment for the week ahead? Put in the chat. Love to celebrate you and hold you accountable. Maybe we'll even make a contract of this commitment and send it to Cory. Just to let him know that you're following up on that tool. And as these come in, just as a reminder to everyone here, we're offering free enrollment as part of our mission to 15 plus classes over the next month. Those include things like embracing diversity with inclusion, transforming conflict into collaboration, the coach approach, as well as adding to our catalog classes on mindfulness, energy management, and yes, parenting during COVID coming later this fall. So if that seems interesting to you, please check it out. Go to honehq.com, use promo code PRESENCE, and would love to see you in an upcoming class and excited to see you there.